So, my initial review of Antorus, the Burning Throne. As I do this now, we're in the second week, which means halfway through the first Mythic week of Antorus. And it's a bit of a mixed bag. I've got good things that I can say about it. I think I've got some worrying things I can say about it as well. The definite good thing about it is that it is more varied than Tomb of Sargeras. I know a lot of people fixated on the soak mechanics, particularly when you got to Mythic level in Tomb of Sargeras. I also draw a parallel here. When I did my initial review of Tomb of Sargeras, I was very positive about it. Again, I thought the fights were nice and varied. It all looked pretty good to me. It's when you got onto Mythic that there were big problems in Tomb of Sargeras. Now, I'd like to think those problems are not going to be in Antorus, but I can't really say that until I've actually properly experienced some Mythic. So that's something I won't even be able to talk about for a couple of months at least. But in terms of the heroic and the normal, the first week I was working late, so I didn't actually get to experience a lot of the heroic. I only did the last 4 bosses, but of course those would be the more difficult bosses. It's a nice mix of some single target and some AoE fights. It's a nice mix of some fights where you've got usual mechanics as well as some new mechanics in there. ANR is my big concern really in terms of the old trash fight. With Hellfire Assault in Hellfire Citadel, we at least got that at the start, so you could just do trash and then do the first boss as if it were trash. ANR's sort of in the middle, and you're just running around different platforms and killing the stuff that's there. It seems a little bit weird, it seems a little bit unnecessary, but the fights in general are fun. It's interesting. We're going to get a little bit tired, but at least we know it's coming to an end of the old Legion backgrounds, the sort of greenish backgrounds. Can get a bit, a bit much. It changes a little bit right at the end. Of course, Argus, nice colourful room. That's very welcome there. Of course, that's a gimmick fighting of its own making as well, with the idea of, being able to die. Not being able to die. You will die, and you will get res back up. Maybe you'll die again and get res back up again, which gives you the opportunity to triple pot in that fight. So don't forget to make sure that you've double potted before Argus kills you all, because otherwise you'll have wasted the fact that you can do that. Of course, it'll reset your DPS cooldowns and things like that as well. Now, in terms of the individual fights, ones that I think quite cool, ones not so much. The first fight is just the first fight. It's a standard first fight, what you'd expect. It's just go in and kill it. But where it starts to get a lot more interesting is, for example, Portal Keeper. So different assignments there depending on whether you're on the boss or whether you're going to go through those portals. Thinking about positioning, thinking about getting yourself closest to the portal if you're going to go through that portal. Then on to Kingaroth. I actually quite like Iminar, is sort of okay with the bridge thing. Obviously there, the big barrier there is if someone just blows everyone up. That's a bit weird. But the fight itself is just fairly dull really on Heroic. It looks a bit spicier on Mythic though, but then there's also been reports on Mythic of problems with people DCing and stuff like that. Bit of a shame if that's the case, which it seems to be. Hopefully that's something that can be fixed. But Kingaroth I really like, because on that one it's really all very much about positioning, because you're really for most of the fight just around this ring on a boss, but you've got other things going on that can get you basically, oh, what the hell, what just killed me? So you have to sort of pay attention as well. And then you move on from there to what you would say are probably the more difficult fights on Heroic. Eventually, like Varimathras is a sort of straightforward fight for most people. I think the difficulty with that one is the tank positioning seemed to be. As soon as the tanks had it sorted, that seemed to be straightforward. But Coven is a very varied fight, but a very melee-hating fight. Now, I'm going to say something about this one, because this is a standard fight where, on Heroic, of course, Mythic Raiders will get away on Heroic with taking lots of melee, and Heroic Raiders will get away on normal with taking loads of melee. But there are sort of melee-hating abilities on it, and you notice that the guilds that killed it on Mythic basically either took no melee or very few melee. Now, there is... what melee you take doesn't necessarily seem to matter that much. It's not that particular ones are great for it. I mean, there's even been a Retribution Paladin kill it. It's only a few days in. But if we look at some of the things, I mean, I'm going to look at one thing in particular that everyone who've done it on any sort of level will be familiar with, and that's the lightning ability. So this is something whereby you can't be within 2 yards of someone, which doesn't sound like a lot. And it means that if you do, then you're going to chain lightning. You're basically going to kill people and kill yourself potentially as well. So you have to be spread, a little bit spread, not massively spread, a little bit spread. So not too problematic for ranged. Bit of a problem if you've got lots of melee. Now, what can we do about this? Is it that, you know, Blizzard should not put any abilities like that in the game just because it's harmful to melee? No, but I think Blizzard should acknowledge that a lot of melee players exist. In fact, it's their fault, really. When we come back to this, of all the 12 classes there are, 9 of those classes have melee specs. 6 of them can only be melee. You get no choice in the matter whatsoever. With ranged, it's only 3 that have to be ranged. And again, you know, there's 6 that can be ranged. And it's a real tricky one to think about. But I do think that there should be some serious effort into considering these things. Now, one stock and store is usually that if there's a mechanic that be particularly problematic for melee, as in too problematic, then it's just something that affects ranged and not melee. That wouldn't really be appropriate in this case, but maybe what they could do, and I was talking about this on the stream, is maybe the ability that forces you to spread only affects ranged, but maybe there's another ability that happens at the same time. Maybe some random person in the ranged gets another lightning ability that has to be soaked. It's going to do loads of damage, but if there's enough people around it, then it's spread out. That means that and it could be random between melee, ranged, or healer, and that person just has to move to the melee, and that way the melee still get to stay there. That sort of thing would be better. I'm not saying that's a perfect situation. That's just something I literally pulled out my arse, but I do think that whenever you create an ability, if Blizzard ever sort of put in a mechanic in a game and they have to think to themselves, do you know what? Guilds are going to try and take as few as melee as possible, and that means the top guilds are basically not going to take any, or just 1 or 2 that can get away with it. Then you should rethink that mechanic. Because all you're doing is punishing, well, first of all, you're punishing guilds that don't have a lot of ranged. And remember, the majority of the classes are melee. So if you have equal numbers of people playing each particular class and spec, or class role combination at least, you are going to, in the average guild, have many more melee than ranged. You're punishing those guilds. And then within a guild, if you have got the capacity to take extra ranged, you're punishing individual players. Some of your best players may be melee, for example, and you're taking ranged in who is not as good, which is also still punishing the guild, because that means they're going to wipe more to mechanics that you shouldn't really wipe to, because you may be taking a player that doesn't cope with them as well. But you're certainly sitting out really good players just because you can only take so many melee. Otherwise, you're really hurting yourself. And yeah, so that's a real negative for me. And that's a negative on all the modes of it. It's going to, obviously, just because of the way it's panned out, be particularly problematic on Mythic. But then the Heroic Coven as well, they buffed that in the second week. So they buffed the health of the ads. Now, for most of the ads, that's fine. That was okay. If they were too weak, they were too weak. There's one particular ad where it actually does genuinely create a level of challenge that maybe shouldn't be there. Doesn't make it impossible by any means. But that is the healing ad. So there are some ads that spawn on that fight that will do a cast. At the end of that cast, they will heal. So if you haven't killed them before they finish that cast, they're going to heal up. Now, what happens, of course, on most heroics is, whether it's a Pug or whether it's a heroic raiding guild or a mythic raiding guild just doing it for the gear, is you are going to basically split up and kill ads. Now, that's not really going to wash unless you massively outgear it, because it means that you're just not going to kill them in time. So what you really need is a focus situation. So you need to sort of agree, we're going to kill this one first, everyone on this one, and then move around and move around and move around. So there, when you do that, then you can do that. The problem is, of course, if it occurs at a time when there's an awkward mechanic, say lightning, for example, making it very difficult for melee to move around. And again, if you've got a lot of melee, that makes that difficult, beyond just the argument I was talking about just there. But also the fact that a lot of guilds doing it on heroic might not be very quick at moving to the right ad or something like that. And it's that one mechanic that could basically screw you over. So for many of the people that would be doing heroic, I think that creates a level of difficulty that is very high. And I think they maybe should have rethought about that. If they wanted to increase the health of the ads, I maybe think that in that particular ads case, they should have increased the length of time it takes for that cast to occur. I'm not saying they should have just been okay with people splitting up randomly, but I think accept that in a heroic raid, you can have the majority go on the same ad. I'm not saying split it completely. But if there's a few people that just don't get it or just try and split their damage or whatever to whore on the DPS meters, which is going to happen a lot in Heroic, maybe just take account of that, just increase the cast time a bit. So, yeah, Coven for me... Agrimar is a more interesting fight, but I'm not sure a more fun fight. Particularly for melee, again, there's not really anything for melee to do. It's of more interest to ranged. Ranged get to do all the good stuff on this one. And again, I'm not saying that we want the ranged mechanics, because that would be... This is a classic case of where what happens to the ranged can't happen to the melee, because then it's impossible. So they just don't have it happen on melee. The problem is that from melee point of view, there isn't really a lot to do. So from that point of view, a little bit dull. Little bit dull. And this, again, going to the Mythic... another example, I think, of where, although the fight's overall a lot more varied and it looks a lot more fun in many cases, just design decisions or design philosophy decisions perplex me a little bit. Because it's known, for example, Exorcists were complaining when they were killing it. This was the big step-up boss, by the way, because what's been quite disconcerting is on Mythic. I mean, here I am just a few days into it, and... guilds are on the last boss already, and have been for a good day or so. You know, it was limits in terms of the North American #1 guild. They, in the first day, cleared 9 bosses. 9 out of 11 bosses. And then European Realms opened. And Method and Exorcist were set loose. And they got to 10 out of 11. But on Agrimar, Exorcists complained that they were doing a strategy for about 6 hours on it, that Blizzard just then changed, just like that. Now, it might well be that they were quite right to change the strategy. I'm not quite sure what the details of the strategy were, by the way, but it involved them taking about 6 Havoc Demon Hunters. But so they nerfed that. They said, no, this is not right. So they got rid of that. Might be fair enough, okay? And I'm sure when I actually learn more about it, it'll be fair enough. The issue I think that they had is that Blizzard didn't communicate this. And remember, Blizzard don't have to rely on them bringing out a kill video to see what they've done. They're watching them, and they do watch them as they're doing it. They can spy in on the game, of course, it's their game. And it's the fact that they were doing it for 6 hours. Blizzard must have known about this and didn't say anything. That's what's quite worrying. And I know there's obviously the time zone difference thing. We can't expect, like, you know, American-based ones to stay up all night watching this thing. You know, but there are employees around Europe and stuff like that. Maybe there should be a presence for at least the world first race of someone in Europe. Then maybe they send someone to Europe that has the ability to just whisper and go, do you know what, we're not going to be happy about that strategy. But anyway, that aside, what is really noticeable is that when they did kill it, and Method particularly, they used rogues, multiple rogues again. Hello, Avatar again all over it, isn't it? And here's what's curious for me. So you don't want people stacking up on Demon Hunters, but you're absolutely fine stacking up on rogues, because it's the usual thing. The rogues are going... There's a mechanic on Mythic that is going to take some coordination to deal with. But hey, if you've got half a dozen rogues, don't have to worry about it. Don't have to worry about that mechanic. Ignore it. It's fine. Do the fight as normal. What? And I know the rogues that might be watching this are going to go, oh no, stop moaning about rogues, stop moaning about rogues. I'm sorry, but this is ridiculous. When you have got the same class, tier after tier after tier, being able to ignore what's supposed to be the mythic mechanics, or one of the crucial mythic mechanics, on one of the tough mythic fights. I mean, no one cares if you can circumvent an ability on an easy boss, because the easy boss is the easy boss. It's going to die anyway. What matters is, how do you deal with those tough bosses? The bosses that are going to take you even good guilds, like a reset to kill, and other guilds, maybe multiple resets to kill. Those really tough bosses that can determine how well you're going to do in that tier. Have you got classes that just completely ignore the mechanics that are put in there to make the fight difficult? And if you've got access to a load of them, great. And sometimes, you know, and this is when you know it's bad, when you will get people to go on alts that are not actually at the same standard as their mains. So we're not talking about in the top guilds where everyone's all at the same standard. They've got multiple alts that are all as good. We're talking about lower down where maybe you've got alts that are raid ready. They're not anywhere near as good as your main one, but you'll take them anyway because they just circumvent this mechanic. That is also bad design. Terrible design. Now, whether it's bad design of the fight or whether it's bad class design, I don't know. And it comes back to this lack of coordination between encounter and class design that I've frequently talked about. But whatever it is another problem that looks like it's looming for me. At the moment, I recognise that I'm sounding really down on Antorus at this point. And it's not the feeling I'm getting, but it's just I'm tempering it with caution because I was very positive about Tomb of Sargeras after I'd done it on Heroic and Normal. And I feel good about Antorus in terms of the raid, not necessarily me personally, but in terms of the overall raid experience, it feels pretty good after doing Normal and Heroic. But I see issues on the Mythic side of it, and it was the Mythic that really salted me, if you want to call it that, for Tomb of Sargeras. And I just see me having gripes with Mythic Antorus as well, and that's the way it is. So but in terms of Heroic, if what you're going to be doing is Heroic and you're not going to be planning to do Mythic or not planning to do more than the first few bosses in Mythic, it actually looks pretty good. It looks decent. The fact as well, I mean, this is interesting. Could be either good or bad. The fact that the first bosses were just knocked over so quickly by the top guilds. The first real roadblock has been... I mean, the first mini roadblock was Iminar, the bridge boss. But the first major roadblock was Agrimar. And then, of course, Argus seems to be taking a while as well. Except, worryingly... You know, the fact that they got onto Argus after a day and a half-ish, I think Method and Exorcist, suggests that it will go down this reset. I cannot remember there ever being a tier. I'm not, you know, the individual raid, sure, but an actual tier raid, I cannot remember there ever being one where it was all killed within one reset. And if it is, that might be a bit disappointing. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be easy for everyone, by the way, because there are some mechanics that top guilds will go over very, very quickly. The other guilds will just struggle on. It'll be actually really difficult. Some of those mechanics include ones where class stacking benefits you. And because the top guilds can take whatever they want. Do you know, you need 10 warlocks for this fight? We'll get 10 warlocks for this fight. Simple as that. You know, we need 5 rogues. We can get 5 rogues. Whereas other guilds can only get what they can get. And so sometimes they will struggle a lot more. So it actually, just because it's looked easier for the top guilds than Tomb of Sargeras, doesn't mean it will be for us mere mortals. It may be just as tough. It may actually turn out to be tougher. Who knows? That remains to be seen. But yeah, it looks a lot easier from that point of view. And in fact, you know, speaking personally, I can say that the first 3 bosses in Antorus are a lot more difficult, even though I've not really experienced much of it myself. But you can sort of tell they're a lot more difficult than the first 3 bosses in Tomb. The first 3 bosses in Tomb were rolled over super quickly, not just by the top guilds, but by even cutting edge guilds. Guilds that were just about getting cutting edge and that's about it. They were bowling over the first 3 bosses in Tomb. Not so in Antorus. They have been going over, but not easily. So I think, you know, there will be a decent curve of difficulty for everyone other than the very top guilds. So I think it will be okay from that point of view. I wouldn't be worried that, oh, it just seems a bit easy until you get to Agrimar. For the majority of us, I don't think that's going to be the experience. But anyway, that's my review. It's very much tempered. It's sort of come out a bit negative. I hope I'm wrong on that. When I experience it, maybe I'll be able to talk a bit more. Inevitably, I will on stream, at least, as I experience it myself at some point. But in the here and now, I'm just worried about certain aspects of it in terms of design, things that don't seem to be improved on. They just don't seem to be getting better at managing the idea that a lot of guilds have at least a good balance of melee and ranged, and if anything, more melee than ranged. And they don't seem to be getting any better at avoiding class stacking things. And again, I'll say it again, I don't know whether that's an encounter design problem, because I don't think they should have to avoid certain mechanics. I don't think they should have to think, oh, I've got a great idea for a mechanic, but we can't do it because of this. I think if they've got a great idea for a mechanic, they should definitely use it. I just think they need to manage the melee ranged issue and avoid the class stacking issue. And if that means better coordination between class design and encounter design, then that's what needs to happen. That's what should happen. And it's clearly what's not happening. So anyway, let me know what your thoughts are. We're into the second week now. A lot of people who are interested in getting into Antorus will have done so. Have you enjoyed it? What are your fears for coming later on? Or do you think it's going to be absolutely fantastic for your class or spec, or for you personally, or for your guild? If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to like. If you're first time to my channel, subscribe as well. Share it with other people who might be interested. And until next time, I'll see you later and have fun in Antorus.